Chapter 1461. Lanfoy's soul power fluctuations gradually subsided, and the blue halos around him were drawn back into his body. Everything quickly returned to normal, and his thin yet handsome face was revealed once again. Are you a sea soul master, your majesty? In the world of soul masters, power was everything, so the judge was immediately speaking to Lanfoy in a more respectful manner after sensing his title Douluo level aura. Lanfoy nodded in response. The judge continued, please forgive me, but I was unable to identify what your martial soul is. Would you be able to enlighten us? Lanfoy hesitated momentarily before replying. My martial soul is Vortex. Vortex? Turbocharge? Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. It seemed that Lanfoy wasn't telling the complete truth. With his immense spirit domain realm spiritual power, he was able to sense many minute things that others couldn't. Right when Lanfoy had released his martial soul, a faint sense of ferocity had emanated from his body. This type of aura was something that only beast martial souls could possess, but a vortex would be an elemental tool martial soul. So where had that ferocious aura come from? This meant that Lanfoy most likely possessed a beast martial soul, but he was able to hide it very well. In any case, it was undoubtedly the case that he was astonishingly powerful. After a brief discussion, the judges gave him a perfect score. Lanfoy's reported age was only 25, so the fact that he was already a titled Douluo immediately made him one of the favorites for this joust for a spouse event. Tang Wulin naturally came after Lanfoy, and after glancing at his registration form, the expressions of all of the judges had clearly changed slightly. The judge that was sitting at the very center of the panel said, "Greetings, your majesty. Please release your martial soul." According to the registration form, Tang Wulin was Ulanyu of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, and he had recently become a titled Douluo. He was slightly younger than even Lanfoy, and most importantly, he was from one of the most ancient and most powerful soul master families. If his martial soul really were the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon, then he would definitely receive a perfect score. Titled Douluos were definitely going to be the favorites during this event, particularly when they were as young as the likes of Lanfoy and Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin stood with his hands clasped behind his back with a proud look on his face. All of a sudden, scintillating lightning erupted from his body, following which a layer of bluish purple scales appeared over his skin. At the same time, a bluish purple giant dragon projection appeared behind him. It was none other than the legendary Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon. This was a product that Tang Wulin had created by combining his Golden Dragon King bloodline, Tyrant Dragon Soul Spirit, and Infernal Lightning Vine. Even a true member of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan may not be able to identify that Tang Wulin's martial soul was fake, let alone these judges. On top of that, the aura that he had displayed was far more powerful than that of the average Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon martial soul, indicating that he was definitely a titled Douluo. On this occasion, the judges didn't even hold a discussion before giving him a perfect score. Lanfoy was naturally waiting for him at the exit, and as soon as Tang Wulin emerged, he immediately asked, "Do you really like the Silver Dragon Princess?" Tang Wulin asked, "Why do you ask?" A wry smile appeared on Lanfoy's face. "I was thinking that if you're only here for the prizes, then perhaps I could somehow bribe you into dropping out of the event. I really don't want to face an opponent like you. I'm not scared of you, of course. I'm just concerned that my chances of being selected by the Silver Dragon Princess in the end would be diminished with too much competition." Tang Wulin asked, "What about you? What did you come here for?" Lanfoy replied without any hesitation, "I'm here for Guyuna, of course. I fell in love with her the first time I saw her. Never has any woman enraptured me as much as she has. I'm taking her no matter what. If you become my opponent, I'm going to fight with all my power, so you better be prepared." Tang Wulin smiled and replied, "Looks like we're bound to be rivals then. My love for her runs far deeper than yours." He was putting on a slightly arrogant display, but his words were nothing but the heartfelt truth. Lanfoy harumphed coldly, "You are indeed very powerful, but you're no match for me. I hope we get matched up in the elimination matches, so you won't even get a chance to progress to the top 10. Tang Wulin replied in an indifferent voice, "Let's move on to the next examination. If you encounter me in the elimination matches, then I can only offer you my condolences in advance." All of a sudden, the atmosphere between the two of them had become very tense, and Lanfoy completely ignored Tang Wulin as he walked on ahead. There was no line at the fifth examination, perhaps due to how slowly the fourth examination was progressing. The fifth examination was a very traditional test of spiritual power. Spiritual power was one of the most important parameters for a soul master's cultivation, and after arriving at the examination site, Tang Wulin and Lanfoy immediately figured out why there was no line outside. There were a total of 20 metal helmets, so 20 people could be tested at the same time. It was no surprise that this examination was progressing far quicker than the previous one. Tang Wulin and Lanfoy arrived in front of two empty helmets, and the helmets were fitted onto their heads by a pair of workers. Once you receive the signal, release your spiritual power, and the result will automatically be recorded. All right, Lanfoy replied, while Tang Wulin remained silent. Soon, the electronic voice rang out. "Please begin." Tang Wulin had only just begun to release his spiritual power when he suddenly sensed a very different aura being released by Lanfoy. He was at the spirit domain realm. Tang Wulin was quite astonished by this discovery. Not only did Lanfoy possess a very lofty cultivation rank, even his spiritual power had also reached the spirit domain realm. He had never heard of anyone so close to his own age that was also a titled Douluo at the spirit domain realm. One had to realize that attaining spirit domain realm spiritual power was even more difficult than becoming titled Douluo for the vast majority of soul masters. So this was very incredible to Tang Wulin. After a brief moment of astonishment, Tang Wulin followed his original plan and only released his spiritual power to the above average range of the spirit abyss realm before stopping. It was far too astonishing for someone of his age to possess spirit domain realm spiritual power, and he didn't want to attract too much attention at this point. However, Lanfoy was clearly very competitive and released his spirit domain realm spiritual power to its full extent. Tang Wulin couldn't help but wonder if Lanfoy had also attained a spiritual domain. Beep. The examination was complete, and the metal helmets were automatically lifted while a pair of workers made their way toward them with bewilderment in their eyes. Exactly who were these two people? One of them was at the spirit abyss realm while the other was at the spirit domain realm. Even in the spirit pagoda, there weren't that many people who had reached the spirit abyss realm, let alone the spirit domain realm. Up to this point, there wasn't even a single participant who had displayed spirit abyss realm spiritual power, yet these two had both reached that standard. Spirit abyss realm spiritual was already enough for a perfect score, and no one had anticipated that any of the participants would be at the spirit domain realm, so that was also a perfect score of 10. Chapter 1462. I'm at the spirit domain realm, yet I'm receiving the same number of points as him. That doesn't seem very fair. Lanfoy complained. My apologies, your majesty. We'll report this to our higher-ups right away to see if the result can be adjusted. Please move on to the next examination. We'll contact you as soon as a verdict is reached. A worker said in an extremely polite manner. Spirit domain realm spiritual power indicated that Lanfoy was definitely going to be able to become a hyper Douluo, and perhaps even a limit Douluo in the future. Countless hyper Douluos in history have been unable to break through the limit Douluo bottleneck due to insufficient spiritual power, yet this wasn't going to apply to Lanfoy. In particular, many of the female employees were staring at Lanfoy with glowing eyes. His future was truly limitless. Tang Wulin had received a perfect score for all 5 examinations thus far, but he had been completely outshone by Lanfoy's spectacular display of spiritual power. Even Kaiangyu Dongfang had been alerted to this astonishing result. What? There's a titled Douluo level C soul master at the spirit domain realm? Kaiangyu Dongfang's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. He was very confident in Kaiangyu's hunting, but such a formidable foe was going to present a huge threat to Kaiangyu's hunting. Yuna consoled in a gentle voice. There's no need to be concerned, Chairman. The final choice lies in my hands. Kaiangyu Dongfang shook his head in response. No, Santing needs to win this event fair and square. Otherwise, there's no point in holding this event. Spirit domain realm spiritual power doesn't mean everything. I'm sure Santing will be able to take care of things for himself. Yuna nodded in response and didn't say anything further. Gather all of the information you have on this Lanfoy and give it to me as soon as possible. Kaiangyu Dongfang instructed. Tang Wulin was naturally unaware of the fact that Lanfoy had become the center of attention for Kaiangyu Dongfang due to his display of spiritual power. If he were aware of this, he would be quite pleased as the attention placed on Lanfoy would diminish the amount of attention placed on him, which was definitely a good thing in these early stages. I finally beat you. Lan Foisey gloated with a wide smile. During the past few examinations, Tang Wuling had constantly been beating him, and he was finally exacting some revenge. Tang Wuling replied in a cold voice, "It's only a matter of time before I get to the spirit domain realm as well." Lan Foisey chuckled, "But you haven't made it yet, have you? It's okay to be envious. I won't judge you." Tang Wuling raised an eyebrow and said, "The total score is what matters." He had received perfect scores in all 5 examinations thus, so overall, he was still doing better than Lan Foisey despite the fact that the latter had displayed spirit domain realm spiritual power. There are still more trials to come. I'll definitely outstrip you soon. Following the first 5 rounds, Tang Wuling had a total score of 50, while Lan Foisey's score was only 46. However, just as they were making their way toward the 6th examination, Lan Foisey was informed that following a discussion from the higher-ups, it was decided that he would receive a bonus 5 points for the spirit domain realm spiritual power he had displayed, thereby improving his tally to 51. "What do you have to say now?" Lan Foisey gloated as he turned to Tang Wuling with a smug grin. Tang Wuling merely remained silent as his expression darkened significantly. Even though it was a good thing that Lan Foisey was taking the spotlight away from him, he was beginning to pay more attention to Lan Foisey. Lan Foisey's disguise abilities were of a very high caliber, to the extent that Tang Wuling was unable to ascertain his true power. Even though he was only displaying his powers bit by bit, what he had displayed thus far was already very astonishing. Perhaps he really was going to become a formidable rival. On top of that, Tang Wuling was very displeased with the entrancement in Lan Foisey's eyes whenever he talked about Guyuna. The 6th examination was a test of one's proficiency in their secondary occupation. This was the examination that took up the largest area as it was split up into 4 segments, one for each secondary occupation. Lan Foisey wasn't a blacksmith, so they had to part ways for this examination. "You're a blacksmith. Humph. That makes sense, seeing as strength is your only redeeming trait," Lan Foisey said with a hint of mockery in his eyes. Tang Wuling asked, "What's your secondary occupation?" Lan Foisey chuckled in response. "Me? I'm a Mecha maker. I'm a prodigy when it comes to mecha construction." Tang Wuling had already anticipated that there would be a secondary occupation examination, so he was prepared. Of course, he wasn't going to display the full extent of his forging abilities. Compared to his spiritual power, his forging ability was something that was even more necessary for him to hide. Thus, he only displayed a level of proficiency roughly equivalent to that of a 5th-rank blacksmith. Even so, forging was the most difficult of the secondary occupations, so he received a score of 7. If he had displayed the skills of a saint blacksmith, then he would have received a perfect score. Kyangyu's Hanting only joined the examinations near the end, and he had already been made aware of the spirit domain realm spiritual power displayed by Lan Foisey. Kyangyu's Hanting was currently only at the spirit abyss realm, and this piece of news made him even more concerned than Kyangyu Dongfang had been. As such, he had displayed his abilities without any reservation and maintained a streak of perfect scores. Due to the special nature of his identity, there were designated passages for him to access the examinations, so he didn't have to line up. He was a mecha mechanic, and he had chosen the secondary occupation as it was the one that took up the least amount of time among the 4 secondary occupations. He had never been very interested in his secondary occupation. In contrast, he much preferred to cultivate and improve his own combat prowess. In his eyes, there was no point in pursuing a secondary occupation. He had the best mecha designers and mecha makers to craft the ideal suits of battle armor for him, so there was no need for him to dedicate any time to this area. As such, he was only a 6th-rank mecha mechanic, and he had no plans to improve on that. Thus, he received a score of 7 for this examination, then moved on to the 7th one. As he did so, he just so happened to run into Tang Wuling, who had also just emerged from the 6th examination. Tang Wuling had met Kyangyu's Hanting once at the train station, so he was naturally able to immediately identify him. Kyangyu's Hanting was wearing a set of white robes that complemented his handsome looks, and he was walking toward the 7th examination with a sense of confidence and purpose. Tang Wuling's expression changed ever so slightly upon seeing Kyangyu's Hanting. Kyangyu's Hanting was the future heir to the Spirit Pagoda, and this event was being held by the Spirit Pagoda, so there was no way that the event wouldn't be rigged in his favor. Kyangyu's Hanting paid no heed to Tang Wuling and moved on without taking any notice of him. Right at this moment, Lan Foisey just so happened to have also finished his examination, and he turned to Tang Wuling as he asked with a smile, "How'd you do for the 6th examination?" Tang Wuling replied, "I got 7 points." Lan Foisey chuckled, "I also got 7. I'm still 1 point ahead of you overall, so you're probably not going to be able to catch up to me." His voice was rather loud, so Kyangyu's Hanting naturally heard him as well. He turned around and glanced at the duo with slightly furrowed brows, then continued onward. Lan Foisey's mood seemed to have improved significantly, and he asked, "Who's that? Looks like a cocky bastard. Do you know him?" Tang Wuling replied, "He's Kyangyu's Hanting, the grandson of the Spirit Pagoda chairman, Kyangyu Dongfang." Lan Foisey's eyes immediately widened upon hearing this. Then doesn't he have an unfair advantage? Chapter 1463. Tang Wuling shrugged in response. "Perhaps it's all rigged. He's the heir to the Spirit Pagoda, and I've heard that he's a titled Douluo as well. If you're looking for a rival, I think you should be going after him." Lan Foisey appraised Kyangyu's Hanting intently as he harumphed coldly. "I'm sure they wouldn't dare to rig such an important event too heavily." Tang Wuling chuckled. "Don't forget that the rules were made by his family. You better pray that you encounter him during the elimination matches. Otherwise, if he makes it into the top 10, none of us will have a chance. If they dare to rig the event like that, then I'll." Lan Foisey didn't finish his sentence, but his chest was heaving with rage. Tang Wuling said, "Let's go and finish the examinations first." This Lan Foisey was extremely powerful and possessed spirit domain realm spiritual power, so he would definitely prove to be a formidable foe for Kyangyu's Hanting if they were to face one another. And Tang Wuling certainly wasn't opposed to creating some trouble for Kyangyu's Hanting. Following the first 6 examinations, Tang Wuling and Lan Foisey were sitting at 57 and 58 points, respectively. The 7th examination was something that Tang Wuling was very familiar with, mecha control. However, Lan Foisey was completely mortified at the sight of the generic yellow mechas being used for the examination. They're testing mecha control? Lan Foisey gulped nervously upon seeing this. "Do you not know how to pilot mechas?" Tang Wuling asked. "Generally speaking, soul masters of a certain caliber all had a certain level of mecha piloting experience." "I don't, not even a little bit," Lan Foisey replied in a dejected manner. "I always thought that this stuff was useless compared to individual power." "You're a battle armor master, right?" "I am as well." "Isn't battle armor far superior to mechas?" Tang Wuling smiled and replied, "Once you reach a certain level, anything can become very powerful, including mechas." "Oh. It sounds like you're an expert," Lan Foisey remarked as he raised an eyebrow. Tang Wuling shrugged in response. "I'll definitely do better than you, at least." The mecha control examination was very interesting in that each participant had to draw lots to receive a certain skill that they had to perform, and the score was given based on the difficulty and execution of the skill. This examination had clearly been prepared for soul master who excelled in mecha piloting but were lacking in other areas. Kyangyu's Hanting went ahead of Tang Wuling and Lan Foisey, and he drew a skill before getting into a mecha. The mecha control examination was completed in the air, so it didn't take up any space in the sports stadium. There were 10 designated areas in the air that could allow 10 participants to undergo the examination at once, and there were dozens of judges standing down below. It was originally planned for each participant to complete 3 designated skills, but due to the large number of participants, that requirement had been reduced to 1. But the difficulty of these skills had been raised significantly as a result. After Kyangyu's Hanting had drawn his designated skill, an electronic voice immediately announced it to be dual directional change charge. "What's that?" Lan Foisey asked in a completely perplexed manner. Tang Wuling replied, "Dual directional change charge refers to a mecha changing directions twice in succession during a forward charge to throw off the opponent. The most difficult part about the skill is to maintain control over the mecha during the directional changes. The criteria for this skill should be the speed of the mecha's movement, as well as the degree of control maintained throughout the maneuver." Lan Foisey turned to Tang Wuling with a surprised expression. "You really are sounding like an expert." Tang Wuling shrugged in response. "That's because you're speaking to a master mecha pilot. TCH. Lan Foisey pursed his lips as he cast his gaze toward Kyangyu's Hanting's mecha. "Begin." Kyangyu's Hanting's mecha immediately rose up into the air following the announcement by the electronic voice. Tang Wuling was an outstanding mecha pilot himself, so he was able to ascertain a lot based on this sequence alone. Kyangyu's Hanting was able to instantly activate the mecha and bring it up to such a high speed in the blink of an eye, indicating that he was extremely familiar with piloting mechas. Each mecha had a tolerance limit. If the limit were exceeded, the mecha would be at risk of being damaged, but staying too far within the limits would hamper the mecha's full potential. From the propulsion sequence that Kyangyu's Hanting had employed to rise up into the air, Tang Wuling could tell that he had grasped this balance perfectly, pushing the mecha to just within its tolerance limit. Tang Wuling was quite surprised that Kyangyu's Hanting was such an expert mecha pilot. The yellow mecha shot forth into the air like a cannonball, then immediately charged forward without delay, completing 2 directional changes during the process in an extremely fast, smooth, and controlled maneuver. This was truly a flawless textbook display. It was as if 2 massive streaks of of yellow light had flashed through the air, and within the span of a few blinks, the maneuver had already been completed. The yellow mecha was trembling slightly from exertion, but the speed, power, and coordination it had displayed had all exceeded the limit of a normal yellow mecha. The mecha descended from above, and it only began to decelerate using the propellers beneath its feet at an altitude of around 30 meters, sending fierce winds sweeping in all directions. Lan Foisi harumphed coldly. What's the point in something like this? Tang Wuling shrugged in response. There's a point to everything. It's just that mechas of this caliber aren't able to display anything worthwhile. He had always been an avid mecha enthusiast ever since he was a child, which was why he had always made time to practice his mecha piloting skills even after he attained a suit of battle armor. In particular, after Zhen Hua had told him about how useful mechas could be to soul masters, he had become even more determined to continue developing in this area. Among the soul masters that he knew, the first divine grade mecha pilot was Mu Yi, and he had witnessed just how powerful Mu Yi's divine grade mecha was. At the very least, the core components of a divine grade mecha had to be constructed from divine grade metals. Only then would the mecha have a mental connection with its pilot. Mu Yi had told him that a divine grade mecha was a second life for a soul master. He had even given up the chance to become a limit Douluo in order to become a divine grade mecha pilot, and that was sufficient testament to just how alluring a divine grade mecha had been to him. The most difficult aspect in crafting a divine grade mecha was the heavenly refined metals that were required. However, Tang Wuling had recently become a divine blacksmith, so that wouldn't be an issue for him. He was definitely going to craft a divine grade mecha for himself someday, and that day wouldn't be too far away. Even though his cultivation rank was progressing very quickly, he was still quite far away from the limit Douluo level. Even with his aptitude, it would take at least 10 more years for him to become a demigod. However, the next 10 years were extremely important for both Shrek Academy and the Tang sect, so he couldn't just waste them. As such, he had to do everything in his power to improve himself, and both mechas and battle armor were shortcuts that a soul master could take to enhance their own powers. Hey, what are you spacing out for? It's your turn, Lan Foisi said as he nudged Tang Wuling on the arm. Only then did Tang Wuling return to his senses and make his way forward before scanning his electronic identification badge. All of the lots were drawn electronically in order to save time, and soon, the electronic voice rang out. Your tested skill will be a triangular circuit. Tang Wuling raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. This was a skill that seemed to be very simple, but actually involved many intricacies. It was Ling Wuyu who had taught him this skill, and mastering it had been extremely beneficial to his development in mecha piloting. Triangular circuit was a maneuver during which a mecha changed directions thrice in succession while moving to form a triangle. Precision was valued above all else in this skill, and one had to create a perfect triangle during the maneuver before returning to the exact spot where they had started. Chapter 1464. The difficulty in triangular circuits lay in the fact that extremely precise control was required. An equilateral triangular circuit had to be created, which required taking 60-degree turns that had an extremely heavy physical impact on both the mecha and its pilot. This could easily result in damage being incurred by the mecha and the pilot, but if the maneuver were performed too slowly, that would completely defeat the purpose. As such, the triangular circuit was very easy to execute, but to execute it both quickly and accurately was a very difficult task, which was why triangular circuit was a foundational skill for mecha pilots when it came to directional change. Tang Wuling had already climbed into another generic yellow mecha, and even in the mecha pilot room, he could still see Lan Foisi looking up at him. He closed his eyes as he recalled the important technical points involved in triangular circuits, and a possibility suddenly sprang into his mind. I've already accumulated a lot of points, so maybe I should give it a try. With that in mind, a faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Begin. Tang Wuling controlled his yellow mecha to take flight following the prompt from the electronic voice. Instead of flying up at a high speed like Kyangyu's hunting had, his mecha ascended to the test altitude at a very even speed. There were other mechas not far away that were executing their respective designated skills. Tang Wuling had already reopened his eyes, and sparks of electricity were flashing deep within his pupils. There was nothing faster than light in this world. Lan Foisi stood down below, and pursed his lips with disdain at the sight of how slowly Tang Wuling's mecha had risen up into the air. He had proclaimed himself to be a master mecha pilot, but he didn't even seem to be as proficient as that Kyangyu's hunting. Right at this moment, arcs of electricity began to run along the surface of Tang Wuling's yellow mecha, as if it were beginning to malfunction. The unstable electrical currents were making the entire mecha tremor slightly, and even the propellers beneath the mecha's feet and on its back were flashing with electricity. The workers overseeing the examination had also noticed this, yet just as they were about to extend an inquiry toward Tang Wuling through their communicator, the yellow mecha suddenly sprang into action. A resounding thunderclap rang out, and the yellow mecha shot forth like a bolt of lightning without any acceleration process. 3 thunderclaps rang out almost in complete unison, making it sound as if the first thunderclap had echoed twice. The yellow mecha looked as if it hadn't moved even a single inch from its original spot, but there was a triangle of electricity left in midair that was slowly fading away. Before the workers and Lan Foisi had a chance to figure out what had happened, the yellow mecha suddenly exploded, and its parts came raining down from above. Thankfully, the judges and workers were all soul masters themselves, and they instantly scattered to avoid being crushed by the falling parts. Holy SHT. Lan Foisi exclaimed as a blue halo was released from his body. All of the falling mecha parts that reached within 3 meters of his body would immediately be diverted away by a burst of strange rotational force. The mecha had exploded, and Tang Wuling was revealed, standing in midair with a slightly numb sensation coursing through his body. If a normal person had been in his place, they would have definitely been killed during that explosion, but with his dragons repulsed to protect him, he had remained completely unscathed. After descending onto the ground, a pleased smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. He had succeeded. The lightning triangular circuit he had envisioned really was plausible. However, it had been achieved through his own power, rather than that of the mecha. Of course, if he had been using his own mecha, which had far greater tolerance than this generic yellow mecha, it definitely wouldn't have exploded. Lightning triangular circuit could be counted as an application of the lightning provided by his infernal lightning vine. Not only did lightning possess incredible offensive power, it also represented phenomenal speed. Tang Wuling was very pleased with this initial experiment, and it was something that he could continue to refine in the future. The infernal lightning vine was currently extremely fond of him. Not only had it broken through the 100,000-year bottleneck, it had devoured so much delicious lightning, and Tang Wuling could even provide it with elemental tribulation lightning, which was something that could not be found in nature. This type of lightning was imbued with the power of laws of this plane, and to put it in simpler terms, not only was Tang Wuling refining metals during his heavenly refinements, he was also baptizing the infernal lightning vine using the power of laws. He was the son of nature, so he was naturally able to protect the infernal lightning vine, and the power of laws imbued within the elemental tribulation lightning was limited, so it wouldn't immediately cause the infernal lightning vine to self-detonate. As such, elemental tribulation lightning had become an incredible delicacy for the infernal lightning vine, and as a result, the infernal lightning vine was willing to immediately follow whatever order was issued to it by Tang Wuling. As long as Tang Wuling took the infernal lightning vine's tolerance range into account while completing heavenly refinements, he could regulate the vine's intake of lightning to prevent it from harming itself. The infernal lightning vine's powers had also provided him with the ideal guise for his supposed identity as a member of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, and in Lan Foisi's eyes, this was simply an application of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon martial soul. How do you like that? Tang Wuling strutted over to Lan Foisi with a proud expression. Are you even going to get a score for this? Lan Foisi asked with a speechless look on his face. Tang Wuling smiled, and countered. So what if I don't get a score? Was that badass or what? Lan Foisi rolled his eyes before skirting around Tang Wuling and making his way over to the mecha examination area as he yelled. Hey, doesn't he need to pay for destroying public property? What are the rest of us supposed to use now? Tang Wuling's expression immediately stiffened upon hearing this. Oi, do you have to be so annoying? The surrounding workers were also completely speechless. The information contained within Tang Wuling's electronic identification badge indicated that he was a titled Douluo from the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, and he had received perfect scores for all of the examinations thus far aside from his forging examination. As for the person behind him, he was a titled Douluo with Spirit Domain Realm spiritual power. It was undoubtedly the case that both of them were going to be heavy favorites. One of the judges made his way over to Tang Wuling with excitement in his eyes. Your Majesty, may I ask you a question? Tang Wuling replied. Go ahead. The judge continued. If you had been using a more powerful mecha to execute that skill, would it have been able to survive without exploding? In other words, what caliber of mecha would be required to withstand the triangular circuit you just executed? Tang Wuling shrugged in response. I'm not sure, but a black mecha should be able to withstand the maneuver. The judge praised in a heartfelt voice. That was absolutely spectacular. Your martial soul must have contributed to the execution of that maneuver, right? Theoretically, if we were to fit a device in a mecha that could convert soul power into lightning power, would it also be able to execute the same maneuver? Chapter 1465. Tang Wuling replied, theoretically, it should work, but the Mecha pilot will need to control the speed and timing of the lightning explosions. On top of that, the Mecha itself would also need to have sufficient physical tolerance for this to work. The judge nodded in response. I thought so, but even so, the triangular circuit you just executed was extremely spectacular and has opened up a new field of possibilities in the realm of high-grade Mecha movement. I'm truly honored to have witnessed something like that. If possible, would we be able to get you to demonstrate the maneuver again in a Mecha provided by our Mecha Pilot Association? Tang Wuling considered this for a moment before replying. I'll have to get back to you after this joust for a spouse event. A hint of disappointment appeared in the judge's eyes upon hearing this. I'll be sure to contact you then. May I ask if you've named this maneuver already? Tang Wuling replied. I'll call it lightning triangular circuit. It's simple and easy to remember. The judge said, according to the rules of our Mecha Pilot Association, the creator of a monumental Mecha piloting maneuver has the right to name it, so you can add a prefix to the lightning triangular circuit. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and he said, all right, then I'll call it the lightning triangular circuit as a present for her. The judge was just about to agree to this when Lan Foisi suddenly interjected. Oi, that's cheating. You can't do that. This has to be a fair competition. You can't just go around giving her presents like this. Tang Wuling countered. If you have what it takes, why don't you give her a present as well? Lan Foisi immediately flared up with rage upon hearing this, but he had to admit that he was indeed incapable of matching Tang Wuling, so he could only storm away in a fit of rage. A worker hurriedly followed along behind him. Your Majesty, you haven't undergone your Mecha examination yet. Lan Foisi didn't even turn his head as he replied. Such a farcical examination is completely beneath me. Just give me a 0. Tang Wuling couldn't help but burst into laughter upon hearing this. Lan Foisi was placing himself on a high pedestal when the reality was that he simply didn't know the first thing about Mecha piloting. The judge asked, are you sure that's what you'd like to name the maneuver? Tang Wuling nodded in response. All right, we'll keep it on our records, but due to the fact that the Mecha you just used has exploded, you'll need to come to our association to execute the maneuver in full before we can officially assign it a name. Tang Wuling was immediately enlightened upon hearing this. It was no wonder that the judge had been so enthusiastic about getting him to name the maneuver. He was doing this so Tang Wuling would have to demonstrate the maneuver for them again. All right, we'll see if I can make some time to pay your association a visit. Thus, he exchanged contact details with that judge. Even though the lightning triangular circuit he had just executed was a high-end skill, he had destroyed the Mecha, so there was no way for a score to be assigned, and he had to pay for the Mecha as well. Tang Wuling gave a nonchalant reaction to this, completely in character with his adopted identity as the proud young master of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan. Thus, Lan Foisi still led Tang Wuling by 1 point in the total score. The first 7 examinations had been very simple, and they were far easier than Shrek Academy's enrollment examination. Unlike Shrek Academy's examinations, which tested the skills and character of its students, these examinations were more so an opportunity for one to display their talents. The enrollment examinations had to be preserved in the reconstructed Shrek Academy, and it was perhaps even necessary to further improve them. Perhaps reference could be drawn from some of the educational methods employed by the old demons on the demonic island. Those examinations would definitely be extremely effective for honing one's willpower and mental state, but of course, students would only be able to undertake them after reaching a certain age. Many of Shrek Academy's students had already been to the demonic island, and they had clearly all undergone evolutions. What are you smiling about? Don't think that you've won just because you've invented the lightning triangular circuit. Lan Foisi's critical voice jerked Tang Wuling out of his train of thought, and an amused look appeared on his face. You shouldn't be seeing me as the enemy. Your greatest enemy is up ahead. Lan Foisi's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. You're saying that the event is rigged? What if the outcome has already been predetermined, and Gu doesn't choose any of us in the end? Tang Wuling replied, even if the event is rigged, it still must run its course. If you display to everyone that you're more exceptional than him in all areas, yet Gu still chooses him in the end, then everyone will begin to doubt the fairness of the event, so just focus on doing your best. Lan Foisi nodded in response. I have to succeed. This is the first time my heart has ever been swayed like this by any woman. Tang Wuling shrugged in response. She's also the only woman for me on the rostrum. Chairman, the explosion that just took place was a result of one of the test mechas being pushed beyond its maximal tolerance capacity. Everything has already been taken care of, and no one was hurt. Kaiyangu Dongfang nodded in response. Good. Make sure to prioritize safety above all else. The reputation of the Spirit Pagoda was attached to this event, and it had also received strong support from the Federation, so it would be very troublesome if something were to go wrong. Also, the participant piloting the Mecha received no score due to the destruction of the Mecha, but the people of the Mecha Pilot Association have deemed the skill that he executed to be a monumental maneuver. As long as he can replicate the same maneuver in a high-end Mecha, it will be confirmed as an original maneuver invented by him. Kaiyangu Dongfang turned to Gu with a smile, and said, looks like you really do possess extraordinary allure. Nana, there are even Mecha pilots inventing new maneuvers for you now. The worker hesitated momentarily before continuing. Chairman, the participant assigned the name Gu lightning triangular circuit to the new maneuver. Even Gu herself faltered slightly upon hearing this, and Kaiyangu Dongfang couldn't help but burst into laughter. What a bold young man. Having said that, this is the attitude that's required when pursuing a woman. Who is this participant? He is Oolong of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, and he's displayed an exceptional performance thus far in the examinations. Oolong Gu expression changed slightly upon hearing this. Wasn't his battle armor named Dragon Moonsong? According to the workers, the 8th, 9th, and 10th examinations were all going to be tests of one's overall skills and abilities. At the 8th examination was a massive soul tool. It was the most eye-catching fixture in the entire sports stadium as it was over 80 meters tall, and was shaped like a small spirit pagoda. It was clear that this was a soul tool unique to the Spirit Pagoda, and Tang Wuling had never seen it before. It was clear that the Spirit Pagoda really had poured a lot of effort into this event. Under the guidance of a worker, Tang Wuling and Lan Foisi strode into the giant pagoda-shaped soul tool together. You're going to be teleported into a place similar to the Spirit Ascension Plane, and it'll be filled with powerful soul beasts, but the teleportation locations will be randomized, so the two of you won't end up together. Once inside, your goal will be to survive for as long as possible. The longer you survive, the higher the score you'll receive. Chapter 1466. Ever since Tang Wuling had made it into Shrek Academy, he had only used the Spirit Ascension Plane on a few occasions, but he could still clearly recall the feeling of his soul spirits being enhanced in the plane. However, the conditions that had to be satisfied to enter the Spirit Ascension Plane were very steep, and according to the teachers of Shrek Academy, it would be very difficult for soul spirits to continue to improve in the Spirit Ascension Plane after they reached the Black Grade. All of Tang Wuling's soul spirits were currently of an extremely high caliber, thereby making the plane redundant to him. Tang Wuling was quite taken aback by the fact that there was such an examination during this event, and he couldn't help but think back to his encounter with Beast God Tian. He was very confident in himself, but he had been made to feel completely powerless in the face of the Beast God, and if it weren't for his golden trident, he would most likely already be dead. With that in mind, he reflexively thought of the giant silver claw that his friends had mentioned. Who could that claw belong to? Could it be that another almighty being capable of commanding even the Beast God existed in the depths of the Great Star Dou Forest? Could this mean that soul beasts weren't extinct? After all, the Spirit Pagoda was providing this examination to soul masters who were at rank 60 in soul power, so the soul beasts within this plane were definitely going to be quite formidable. May I ask the name of the plane? Tang Wuling asked. A worker replied, this is the Myriad Beast plane that Ms. Gu recently developed. You'll be sure to reap unexpected benefits inside. As such, this 8th examination is actually a reward for all participants of this event. You'll know what I mean once you enter the plane. Lan Foisi couldn't help but praise. Ms. Gu truly is the perfect woman. She possesses power, intellect, and beauty of equal measure, and, hey, wait for me. Why are you in such a hurry? Tang Wuling had already made his way over to the entrance of the Myriad Beast plane, which was a door of light. According to the workers, he would be able to commence the trial once he entered through this door. This was different from the Spirit Ascension plane, which one entered spiritually through a device. In contrast, it seems that the soul masters would be physically entering the Myriad Beast plane, so this was a fundamental difference. Tang Wuling strode into the door of light without any hesitation, and from Lan Foisi's perspective, Tang Wuling simply vanished amid a flash of light. Tang Wuling had gone on ahead, but he certainly wasn't going to fall behind. Thus, Lan Foisi also strode into the door of light and vanished right on Tang Wuling's heels. Violent yet linear spatial fluctuations surged through the surrounding area, and Tang Wuling felt the space around him warp while experiencing the changes taking place nearby. The power of space was extremely mysterious and fearsome, and if space were to shatter, it could produce terrifying destructive power. However, using his spirit domain realm spiritual power power, Tang Wuling was able to calmly experience this teleportation process. If my body is being teleported into the myriad beast plane, then wouldn't I be in actual danger if I were to battle a soul beast in there? How are they going to address this issue? Tang Wuling was very curious and intrigued. This teleportation process felt much like the process of teleporting into the Dragon Valley in the Douluo Empire, and he couldn't help but wonder if that small world still existed. All of a sudden, he was instantly struck by a sense of weightlessness, and his soul core immediately contracted, circulating soul power throughout his body to stabilizing in midair. He inspected his internal condition while also appraising his surroundings, and he discovered that his bodily condition was completely normal. All of his powers, regardless of whether it was his spiritual power or soul power, remained completely unaffected by his entry into this space. Tang Wuling's soul power was currently still at rank 91. It wasn't that he was unable to progress beyond this point. He was intentionally slowing down his own rate of progression to prevent his foundation from becoming unstable in the aftermath of his sudden and unexpected breakthrough to the titled Douluo level. His goal wasn't just to become a titled Douluo. His aspirations was to reach the heavenly realm of gods. As such, he had to make sure that every step he took was firm and steady. Back when he had first become a titled Douluo, he had already sensed that a second soul core was materializing within his mind, but it was still quite abstract and indistinct at the time. Now, the second soul core was gradually beginning to take shape, and it was slowly fusing as one with his spirit domain realm spiritual power. This soul core was clearly different from the one in his Dantian in that not only was it able to draw upon his soul power, it was able to do the same with his spiritual power, thereby acting as an ideal bridge between the two. Once a soul master reached a certain level in their cultivation, they would be able to fuse their spiritual power and soul power together to culminate in many powerful skills and abilities. On top of that, with his soul power nourishing and protecting his mind, he would be able to release more spiritual power as well. As his second soul core continued to mature, Tang Wuling found that his spiritual domain was also becoming more stable and easier to control. What currently lay before him was a world that was filled with vitality, and it struck him with a strong sense of familiarity. A peculiar look appeared on Tang Wuling's face as he was reminded of the Great Star Dou Forest. Not long ago, he had almost perished with all of his friends in the Great Star Dou Forest, and he didn't think that he would be able to enter the forest again during this Joust for a Spouse event. Regardless of whether this myriad beast plane was a simulated space or something else, it had definitely been designed with the Great Star Dou Forest as reference. There was no mistaking it as Tang Wuling was the son of nature, so he possessed a very acute sense for life force energy in nature. However, when he tried to experience his surroundings in greater depth, he discovered that this space was somehow not as substantial as the true Great Star Dou Forest despite its physical likeness. This was most likely an independent small space that the Spirit Pagoda had somehow created. Even though it was still different from the true Great Star Dou Forest, one could only imagine the vast amount of resources that would have been required to create such a space. As expected, the Spirit Pagoda really was truly a formidable powerhouse when it came to wealth. The Dragon Valley was a small world as well, but it had been formed naturally, and the Tang sect had only found a key to access that small world. In the Dragon Valley, the dragon spirits and dragon clouds a soul master obtained from the Dragon Valley could enhance their bodies on a fundamental level, and Tang Wuling's endeavor of burying dragon skeletons for 3 years definitely contributed significantly to the rapid progression he had made in his cultivation thereafter. Without the nourishment his body had received during that time, he would have most likely already perished while breaking one of his past golden dragon king seals. Tang Wuling took a deep breath, inhaling a lungful of refreshing air. Regardless of whether this was a real place or not, it instilled him with a sense of comfort. Just as he was about to descend into the forest, the loud cry of a bird suddenly rang out overhead. He was quite startled by this, and he immediately raised his head to find a ball of azure light pouncing down toward him like lightning. The ball of azure light had appeared extremely abruptly, and it was incredibly fast. In response, Tang Wuling immediately crossed his arms to form a barricade in front of himself while also releasing his dragon's repulse. Boom! The massive impact caused him to fly backward, but the ball of azure light was also repelled by his dragon's repulse. Only then did Tang Wuling identify it as a huge azure bird that was quite spectacular to behold. Its entire body was of an azure color, and it looked as if it had been carved out of a piece of jade. Its wingspan was around 5 meters, and it had a pair of menacing green eyes and sharp talons. Even the edges of its wings resembled sharp blades. Is this an azure jade bird? This was a type of soul beast that had been extinct for many years. Azure jade birds were extremely aggressive and would actively attack all living beings that they encountered. But funnily enough, they were herbivorous, and their diets mainly consisted of fruits and seeds. Chapter 1467. Azure jade birds were similar to infernal lightning vines in that both of them were self-destructive. It was virtually impossible for azure jade birds to break through the 100,000-year bottleneck, as they would all transform into giant chunks of jade before that. This type of jade was of superb quality, and many noblemen would collect such prized pieces of jade during ancient times. Humans didn't have anything to do with the extinction of azure jade birds. They were simply far too violent and aggressive, and they would often even attack their own brethren. According to the textbooks of Shrek Academy, this was a self-destructive species that paved the way to its own downfall in the end. It was exactly due to this description that Tang Wuling had a very clear recollection of this type of soul beast. However, just like the infernal lightning vine, this type of self-destructive soul beast was extremely powerful. Azure jade bird possessed extremely hardy skin and bones, and their physical constitution was virtually the best among all birds. On top of that, they possessed a certain level of control over spatial powers, making their attacks very unpredictable. Their bodies were their greatest weapons, but unfortunately for this azure jade bird, Tang Wuling's physical constitution was even more fearsome than its own. Thus, the surprise attack was thwarted, yet before Tang Wuling had a chance to admire this relic of the past, it began to attack him again. It flapped its wings vigorously, piercing through the air amid a sharp screeching sound as it reached Tang Wuling in a flash. On this occasion, Tang Wuling was already prepared, and he clenched his right hand into a fist before launching it toward the oncoming bird. A loud thunderclap rang out, and Tang Wuling remained standing on the spot in midair, but the azure jade bird had completely stiffened in front of his fist with a layer of bluish purple lightning running all over its body. In the next instant, its massive body plummeted out of the sky and thumped down onto the ground below. Azure jade birds were indeed very powerful, but this one was only around 10,000 years old, so it was no match for Tang Wuling. However, Tang Wuling didn't kill it. It was a very good experience to be able to witness an extinct soul beast, and he didn't want to kill such a majestic creature. After that, Tang Wuling quickly descended into the forest. He was very confident in his own powers, but the teachers of Shrek Academy had taught him not to fly over a forest inhabited by soul beasts, as doing so would attract attacks from flying soul beasts, as well as many soul beasts that were concealed within the forest, thereby making for a very dangerous situation. In contrast, it was safest to travel along the ground. All soul beasts were territorial creatures, including soul beasts dwelling in forests. This meant that under the majority of circumstances, one would only have to face one soul beast at a time on the ground. The azure jade bird was spasming incessantly as it lay on the ground, but it was still glowering at Tang Wuling with unbridled fury in its eyes. Settle down, you dumb bird. You're going to get yourself killed sooner or later if you keep this up. Tang Wuling sighed with a shake of his head before continuing onward. The objective of this examination was to survive for as long as possible in here, and he was going to take this opportunity to experience the Great Star Dou Forest. A faint smile appeared on his face, and it gradually became more and more pronounced. He really enjoyed being in this type of relaxing environment. Prior to this, he had been forced to endure horrendous torture at the hands of his uncle teacher. Even with his willpower, he couldn't help but wince at the recollection of the special training that his uncle teacher had forced him to undertake. It was truly a terrible experience. Unbeknownst to him, Zhenhe was practically laughing himself to sleep every night. Thus, Tang Wuling paid no further heed to the azure jade bird and departed from the scene. After learning about the fate of the soul beasts, he simply couldn't bring himself to slaughter them for no good reason, even though it was very likely that the soul beasts here were simulated. He truly didn't want to harm them. The world was already teetering on a tenuous equilibrium. If all soul beasts were to go extinct, he knew what was going to happen. The worsening state of the ancient golden tree had been a direct result of the severe imbalance in the ecosystem, and the tree of life was growing so slowly precisely because of the dwindling life force energy on the Douluo star. The lavish human cities of iron and steel had been constructed on the basis of constantly destroying the habitats of soul beasts. Even though the Douluo star was a large world, if it were to be damaged to a severe enough extent, it would perhaps crumble just like some small worlds had. The more Tang Wuling progressed in his cultivation, the clearer this became to him. The higher ups of the Federation had clearly realized this issue as well, but they weren't thinking about how to improve the situation. After all, humans had grown accustomed to the modern lifestyle, and technology was constantly advancing. As such, as opposed to attempting to repair the environment, the more exciting solution was to find other habitable environments, thereby giving rise to space exploration, as well as the intercontinental war. The Federation's vision was to find another habitable planet within the next century and complete mass migration within the next millennium, prior to completely exhausting the natural resources on the Douluo star. As such, all of the research and development taking place were contributing toward this direction. However, even if this plan could come into fruition, extinction, were soul beasts simply destined to be buried under the sands of time? The Spirit Pagoda had been founded with the objective to change the current situation and help soul beasts prosper, but unfortunately, it had become one of the main perpetrators contributing to the extinction of all soul beasts. A grim look appeared on Tang Wulin's face as this thought sprang into his mind. He was no longer just a student of Shrek Academy, he was now the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master, so he had a duty to try and change everything through his power. The most important thing was to change people's current fundamental values and attitudes. Searching for other habitable environments was naturally very much necessary, but there was no guarantee that the plan would succeed. As such, what people really had to do was protect the Douluo star's natural environment at all costs in order to preserve the current habitable space. With that in mind, a determined look appeared in Tang Wulin's eyes. He had initially embarked on the path of cultivation to find his own parents, but now, he had to strive toward the broader and greater goal of saving the entire planet. His status had changed, and as a result, he had to take on more responsibilities. All of a sudden, a burst of unpleasant beastly cries rang out up ahead. The surrounding area abruptly dimmed as if all of the light had been devoured by something, and as everything began to darken, he was greeted by the sight of many pairs of crimson eyes that looked as if they contained burning flames. He couldn't see the bodies of the creatures that the eyes belonged to, but he was able to determine that he was encountering a type of extinct pack-dwelling soul beasts, known as night flame monkeys. A hint of sympathy welled up in Tang Wulin's heart, and he opened his mouth to let loose a thunderous dragon's roar. The entire Great Star Dou Forest began to tremor violently as if a rumbling thunderclap had just erupted within the undergrowth, and he also released his powerful dragon's might. The surrounding area quickly began to brighten, and the pairs of fiery red eyes also rapidly vanished. Night flame monkeys were very adept in hunting in groups, but they were quite weak individually and very easily intimidated. As such, Tang Wulin's roar and dragon's might were more than enough to scare them away. Chapter 1468. After scattering all of the night flame monkeys, a faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. This was what the Great Star Dou Forest was supposed to be like, a place that was filled with soul beasts and vitality. Judging from the current situation, he seemed to be in the outer circle of the Great Star Dou Forest. Most of those night flame monkeys seemed to be 100-year-old soul beasts, perhaps with a few thousand-year-old ones among them, so they didn't pose much of a threat to him. Instead of making an effort to decide on a certain direction to progress forward, Tang Wulin merely continued onward in a random direction. Right at this moment, he heard a loud roar that belonged to a human rather than a soul beast. Around 100 meters up ahead, a large tree was felled amid a resounding boom, following which a burly figure sprang up into the air. The figure had dazzling crimson flames burning all over his body, and he was swinging a massive axe down from above. In the instant that the large tree was felled, a giant brown ape was sent flying before crashing down onto the ground. The huge fiery axe was aimed directly at the ape, and there was no way for it to evade the attack. Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly, and he instantly covered the distance of around 100 meters, arriving directly in front of the giant ape. Clang! The fiery axe was stopped cold in its tracks by a large hand that was flashing with electricity. The axe was burning with scorching flame and imbued with enormous momentum, as well as the tremendous strength of its wielder, but the hand stood in its way like an immovable fortress. At this point, Tang Wulin had already identified the wielder of the axe to be a soul Douluo with a soul ring configuration of 2 yellows, 3 purples, and 3 blacks. The man appeared to be around 40 years of age, and both of his arms were bared, revealing cords of bulging muscle. A hint of surprise appeared on his face upon having his attack thwarted by Tang Wulin, but that was soon replaced by fury. Are you insane? Piss off, Tang Wulin asked in a cold voice. It's already lost the ability to resist. Why do you insist on killing it? The burly man countered. What kind of question is that? It's a soul beast, and it ambushed me, so of course I'm going to kill it. Did you forget to take your pills? This is the myriad beast plane. These soul beasts are nothing more than bodies of energy that were made to be killed by us. Tang Wulin continued in a cold voice. These soul beasts have already gone extinct in the real world, and this is nothing more than an examination. You already know that they're just bodies of energy, so why do you still feel the need to kill them? I don't have time to talk to a madman like you. Piss off. The burly man attempted to wrench his axe out of Tang Wulin's hand as he spoke, but found himself unable to move the axe even a single inch. His expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and his sixth soul ring lit up as bursts of flames erupted from his body like a series of giant dragons. The flame poured into the massive axe in a frenzy, instantly turning it a scorching white color, and the incredible heat emanating from the axe was making the surrounding air shimmer and warp violently. A cold look flashed through Tang Wulin's eyes as he murmured to himself. I was just curious about how the myriad beast plane would protect the soul masters in it. Bluish purple light erupted from his body as he spoke alongside a thunderous dragon's roar, and thick scales began to appear over his hand, while sharp claws extended out of his fingertips. A bluish golden halo radiated out of his body, and in that instant, the burly man felt as if he had been struck by a burst of irresistible force. He felt as if he had lost the ability to think, and that a wall of iron and steel were bulldozing directly toward him. His fiery battle axe was instantly destroyed, and the terrifying force began to crush his body. This was an attack that Tang Wulin had invented by referencing the battle style of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Clan. He had named it Dragon Lightning Storm, and it was the product of a combination of his dragon's repulse, infernal lightning vine, and spiritual power. Boom, 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 boom. The burly man felt as if one thunderclap after another were erupting within his body, and his soul was on the brink of being blown apart. His soul power had already been completely scattered, and his entire body was numb and immobilized. What was even more terrifying was that he couldn't even feel any pain due to the numbness, but he could clearly feel the lightning seeping into his body. On top of that, there was a burst of powerful suction force emanating from Tang Wulin's hand, so he couldn't even get away. He could only look on helplessly as his own body was gradually devoured by lightning. Right at this moment, the entire surrounding space trembled slightly, and a beam of green light descended from the heavens, shining down upon the burly man's body. All of the electricity was instantly kept out, and in the next instant, the burly man had vanished into thin air. Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and the lightning coursing over his body slowly subsided. That beam of green light seemed to be imbued with the power of laws, and it kept out his power before forcibly teleporting the burly man away. However, the light most likely wouldn't have been able to heal his injuries, and that was the difference between this place and the spirit ascension plane. If his attack had been more aggressive and he had instantly killed the man, then the power of laws within this space most likely wouldn't have been able to protect him. As expected, it wasn't impossible to die here. This was a small world, not a simulated space. Dragon Lightning Storm was indeed very powerful, but unbeknownst to the burly man, physical contact had to be established for the attack to unleash its full power. If he had kept some distance between himself and Tang Wulin, then the potency of the attack would have been significantly lessened. By the time Tang Wulin turned toward the spot where the giant ape had landed, he discovered that it had already fled the scene. The burly man reappeared at the entrance to the 8th examination amid a flash of light. His entire body was giving off a charred scent, and smoke was billowing out of his mouth and nostrils with every breath he took. His entire body was completely numb, and he instantly collapsed onto the ground, where he was immediately attended to by healing system soul masters. Tang Wulin had actually held back by not unleashing the power of his Dragon Lightning Storm all at once. Otherwise, the burly man would most likely already be dead. As he slowly returned to his senses, a hint of fear appeared in the burly man's eyes. Who was that young man that he had just faced? Surely this level of power was comparable to that of a limit Douluo. He had only attained his 8th soul ring not long ago, but he was still a soul Douluo, yet he had just been stomped like an ant. This was simply incredible. Of course, he was completely unaware of the fact that he had just faced the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master. Even Tang Wulin himself had almost fallen to the powers of the infernal lightning vine during their first encounter, and now that the infernal lightning vine had undergone multiple evolutions, its lightning power was so fearsome that even Tang Wulin was forced to exercise caution when using it. It could be said that the Dragon Lightning Storm that Tang Wulin had invented was no less powerful than his 8th soul skill, and it was equivalent in power to a full force strike unleashed while in his martial soul true body form. The burly man could only lament his ill fortune for becoming Tang Wulin's experimental guinea pig. Lanfoisy strolled through the forest with intrigue and amazement in his eyes. It was the first time he had ever been to such a lush forest, and he was basking in the rich life force energy here. What a fantastic place. It doesn't really suit me, but this really is a beautiful environment. I wonder if the land soul beasts of the past inhabited such a place. The rich life force energy here is striking me with the urge to cultivate. I wonder where that guy was teleported to. Maybe I can run into him at some point. Why is it so dark up ahead? Whoa, what a massive vine. As Lanfoisy continued onward, he suddenly discovered a mass of gigantic vines up ahead. At the top of each vine was a huge flower that was dark green in color with traces of bright red peeking out of their tops, looking as if they were ready to bloom at any moment. If such a massive flower bud were to bloom, the flower's diameter would most likely exceed 5 meters. The vines were over 15 meters tall, and the massive flower buds were swaying gently in the wind, creating a very intriguing sight to behold. Chapter 1469. Lan Foisey continued onward as he appraised the vine with amazement in his eyes, but all of a sudden, he drew to an abrupt halt as a sense of peril welled up in his heart. He immediately leaned back before propelling himself backward like a speeding arrow. Right at this moment, the closest vine to him suddenly came crashing down like a giant hammer with a massive flower bud aimed directly at him. During its descent, the huge flower bud instantly spread open, releasing a burst of powerful suction force. Goosebumps appeared all over Lan Foisey's entire body at the sight of the giant flower. After spreading itself open, rings of small sharp teeth were revealed within it, giving it the appearance of a meat grinder. In this perilous situation, Lan Foisey spun around in midair, and a series of blue halos erupted from his body, producing bursts of powerful repulsive force. The massive flower was instantly repelled by the blue halos, but right at this moment, a rich fragrant aroma wafted into Lan Foisey's nostrils, and he was instantly struck by a sense of dizziness. The flower had just released a burst of toxins. A sense of shock and fury welled up in Lan Foisey's heart as his eyes instantly turned blue, and the blue halos around him swept outward as rings of sharp blades. The sharp blades swelled drastically in size, almost instantly transforming into huge scimitars over 3 meters in length that swept toward the huge flower with formidable rotational force. The giant flower was instantly torn apart, and crimson juices flew in all directions, while the fragrant aroma in the air became even more pronounced. Lan Foisey had begun holding his own breath as soon as he realized that something was amiss, but he discovered that the fragrance was able to seep into his body through his pores. Thankfully, with his spirit domain realm spiritual power, he was able to control his own body to close all of his pores and keep the fragrant aroma at bay. However, the toxins that had already entered his body was making him very drowsy, and at the same time, he was experiencing an indescribable sense of euphoria. All he wanted to do was lie down and take a good nap, and even more giant flowers were converging toward him, taking up his entire field of vision. He immediately bit down onto the tip of his own tongue, using the pain to shake off the sense of euphoria as he fled the scene. At the same time, blue halos erupted from his body, forming a tornado-like barrier. These man-eating nightmare flowers were one of the most feared predators of the Great Star Dou Forest. Countless soul beasts and humans had fallen prey to its toxins before they had even sensed any danger, falling into a deep slumber before becoming sustenance for the flowers. Its nightmare toxins were listed by the Tang sect as one of the 10 most potent poisons in nature, and aside from its aroma, it had no shape, color, or form, and it was extremely intrusive, able to seep into its prey's body even through their pores. Furthermore, the effect of the poison acted extremely quickly, producing a paralysis effect on one's brain and even one's mind, thereby rendering them completely unable to resist. Tang Wuling leapt forward, covering several dozens of meters in the blink of an eye, and as he sprang up once again, a grim look appeared on his face. This was already the 7th wave of soul beasts that he had encountered. The previous few waves had all been easily taken care of. He didn't want to hurt any of the soul beasts, so he merely forced them into retreat. If the soul beasts didn't pay any heed to him, then he wouldn't actively attack them either. However, perhaps it was due to the influence of the myriad beast plane, but the vast majority of soul beasts in this space were extremely aggressive. For example, the soul beast that Tang Wuling was currently facing was the most powerful one he had encountered thus far. It was around 4 meters in length, so it wasn't particularly massive, but its bodily proportions were very even and coordinated, and every single one of its muscles seemed to be filled with explosive power. It had a huge head with a black ghostly face that created a stark contrast with its golden fur, and it possessed enormous strength that was on par with Tang Wuling. On top of that, it was standing atop a halo with a golden edge on the outside and black runes on the inside. This was a domain. The soul beast was another type of extinct soul beast that was known as the golden lion mastiff. The legend stated that the golden lion mastiff was the patriarch of all dog-type soul beasts, and there were even legends that claimed it to be the patriarch of all lion-type soul beasts as well. All of these soul beasts possessed incredible strength and were born with domain halos. They were renowned for their insanity during battle, and when they unleashed their dominance domains, their offensive and defensive prowess would be enhanced significantly. On top of that, all of their abilities would become over 50% more powerful, and they would completely lose all sense of pain. Furthermore, they only engaged in battles to the death, thereby earning them countless enemies. As a result, they were eventually hunted down into extinction by all of the powerful soul beasts that they had made enemies of. Judging from the size of this golden lion mastiff and its domain halo, it still hadn't reached the 100,000 year mark yet, but even so, it was still exerting immense pressure on Tang Wuling. During their first clash, the golden lion mastiff had pounced with incredible power, and Tang Wuling was sent flying like a cannonball. He wasn't wounded by the attack, but it had certainly startled him. All of a sudden, the golden lion mastiff let loose a low roar, and its golden fur began to stand up on end as it slowly made its way toward Tang Wuling with a ferocious look in its eyes. The domain halo beneath its paws slowly rose up, and what appeared to be a ghostly shadow was seeping into its body as it activated its dominance domain. With each step it took, its body would expand slightly, and in the blink of an eye, it had swelled to the size of a small mountain. Its fur was glistening with a metallic sheen, and its mouth was filled with sharp fangs. Roar. Another deafening roar rang out, and a black shadow that was identical to its head erupted out of its massive body. This black shadow was far larger than itself, and its roar released fearsome sound waves that proliferated in all directions, reducing everything within a radius of 100 meters to dust. This was its signature sound wave attack, the lion mastiff roar, and it was one of the applications of its dominance domain. Tang Wuling could sense the space around him begin to vibrate at a high frequency as a result of the roar, and his vulnerable orifices were being severely impacted. The powerful sound waves were threatening to shatter the nearby space, and this was only the lion mastiff roar of a golden lion mastiff below the 100,000 year mark. If it were over 100,000 years of age, how powerful would it be? Tang Wuling recalled from his lessons in Shrek Academy that one of the 10 great beasts had been a mastiff type soul beast, but it wasn't a golden lion mastiff as they were already extinct at the time. He was confident that if a 100,000-year-old golden lion mastiff had existed, that mastiff type great beast definitely would have been booted off the list. Purple lightning coursed over Tang Wuling's body, and he let loose a dragon's roar toward the golden lion mastiff. A dragon's head that was comprised of blue lightning emerged, and the sound waves unleashed weren't as fierce as those of the lion mastiff roar, but the roar was still able to protect him while unleashing a counterattack against the golden lion mastiff. Chapter 1470. After letting loose that thunderous roar, the golden lion mastiff instantly sprang up before sending its front paws crashing down toward Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling's expression changed slightly as he sensed the enormous power imbued within the attack, and he knew the aura being released by the golden lion mastiff wasn't simply just one of pure strength. With the enhancements of the dominance domain, its entire body had been filled with pure strength that was filled with a sense of insanity, culminating in an extremely fearsome aura. Tang Wuling didn't dare to fight fire with fire, so he quickly shot back in retreat. Boom. The golden lion mastiff slammed its front paws down onto the ground, and the earth trembled violently as countless trees in the surrounding area were uprooted, and Tang Wuling was flung up into the air by the shockwaves. During this process, his entire body went numb, and he was carried upward by the shockwaves in an uncontrollable manner. The golden lion mastiff drew upon the impact to propel itself up into the air, then swiped a massive front paw horizontally toward Tang Wuling. After unleashing its dominance domain, its offensive prowess had been significantly enhanced, and Tang Wuling didn't dare to hold back any longer. His dragon claw quickly contracted, sending scorching blood essence coursing through his body to instantly alleviate the numb sensation he had been afflicted by. In the face of the golden lion mastiff's massive paw, he retaliated by unleashing a punch of his own, and a rumbling thunderclap rang out, immediately followed by a resounding boom. Tang Wuling was sent flying into the distance, while the golden lion mastiff almost crashed down onto the ground with lightning flashing all over its body, rendering it temporarily unable to continue its assault. Tang Wuling's blood essence churned violently within his body, and he only managed to stabilize himself after he had lost count of how many trees his body had snapped. The golden lion mastiff definitely possessed the greatest strength among all of the soul beasts he had encountered. Perhaps only Lord in full swing would be able to match it in this area, but Lord was a great beast that had lived for countless years, so the fact that the golden lion mastiff was able to match his strength was sufficient testament to how effective its dominance domain was. Of course, despite its enormous strength, it would be virtually impossible for it to harm Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling knew that he would definitely be under constant surveillance in the myriad beast plane, so he didn't dare to display his full power in fear of revealing his true identity. Roar. The golden lion mastiff let loose another furious roar as its mountainous body appeared directly above Tang Wuling. In retaliation, Tang Wuling sprang up and focused all of his power into his fist. Due to the fact that he was unable to use his 9 arts of the golden dragon, he was relying on his own strength, soul power, dragon's repulse, and lightning power. Rumble. Their battle was the epitome of destruction. Tang Wuling was slammed back down onto the ground amid an explosive boom, and he was buried into the earth like a nail. As for the golden lion mastiff, its body reared up slightly, but aside from the fact that the golden luster of its fur had dimmed slightly, the lightning hadn't been able to inflict any substantial damage upon it. After landing on the ground, it slammed its front paws down onto the ground again, and Tang Wuling was forcibly ejected out of the earth as a result of the enormous impact. After that, it opened its cavernous mouth to try and swallow Tang Wuling whole. At this moment, Tang Wuling was in a state of complete disorientation. When he had first encountered the golden lion mastiff, he had completely underestimated it. After all, it hadn't even reached 100,000 years of age yet, while he was a titled Douluo. Thus, he was testing the golden lion mastiff to see exactly what it was capable of. Much to his surprise, the golden lion mastiff's dominance domain was far more powerful than he had expected, and its string of attacks had almost scattered his powerful blood essence. What was even more shocking to him was that his ever-effective bloodline suppression was failing to take effect on the golden lion mastiff. As a result, he was forced firmly onto the back foot, and in his current state, he was completely unable to defend himself against the golden lion mastiff's oncoming attack. He heaved a resigned sigh as a streak of bluish-purple light appeared in midair, and in that instant, everything seemed to suddenly slow down. This wasn't a result of Tang Wuling's time reversal domain. Instead, it was due to the fact that the air had become more viscous due to a sudden influx of lightning elements. Crack. The streak of bluish-purple light struck the golden lion mastiff's body. Compared to its mountainous body, the streak of light was downright diminutive, but in the instant that it was struck, all of the golden lion mastiff's fur stood up on end, and it completely stiffened in midair as its body turned a bluish-purple color. The current golden lion mastiff was rather amusing to behold, as it was like a massive bluish-purple dog that was suspended in midair. In the next instant, it plummeted down from the heavens in a state of free fall, smashing a massive crater into the ground. As for Tang Wuling, his body was still on the ascent from the impact of the golden lion mastiff's paw slams, and only after he had reached the apex of his ascent did he begin to fall. At this point, he had already had a chance to catch his breath, and his dragon core and soul core were fully functional again as he righted himself in midair. The attack that he had just unleashed was his lightning god whip. This was the first time that he had used this soul skill during a real battle, and it had proven to be extremely effective. Due to his adopted identity as the young master of the blue lightning tyrant dragon clan, he could only use his own lightning power, and he couldn't reveal his infernal lightning vine, so he had unleashed that attack in a very sneaky manner. As a result, he was unable to unleash the full power of the lightning god whip, but even so, it was still an extremely fearsome attack. This was his ninth soul skill, after all, so it was only natural that the golden lion mastiff was unable to withstand it. Thus, Tang Wuling hovered in midair as he cast his gaze toward the golden lion mastiff down below. Instead of being enraged by the string of attacks he had been forced to withstand, he was quite elated to have encountered such a powerful opponent. The golden lion mastiff was a figurative whetstone with which he could sharpen and hone all of his skills and abilities. At the same time, he wanted to assess just how powerful this golden lion mastiff was. The golden lion mastiff was spasming uncontrollably from the effects of the lightning god whip, and Tang Wuling could see that its body was beginning to shrink while the dominance domain's effect was gradually weakening. Oh. Did the lightning god whip disable its domain? The final trace of bluish-purple lightning finally vanished from the golden lion mastiff's body, and it had reverted back to its original size. All of its fur had been charred slightly black, but what caught Tang Wuling's attention the most was that the golden lion mastiff's black ghostly face had receded to reveal a rather adorable chubby face. In the end, the original ghostly face was reduced to a pair of black spots on the golden lion mastiff's eyelids. Woof, woof. It barked a few times in Tang Wuling's direction before immediately fleeing the scene. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.